Egypt, known for the pyramids, the Nile River, and mummies, also happens to be the northernmost country on the continent of Africa, versus South Africa, known for its beautiful beaches, stunning landscapes, and quite frankly, the women. Also happens to be the southernmost country on the continent of Africa. Geographically, they literally couldn't be farther apart. But what brings them closer together? They're actually number one and number two on the list of the biggest economies in all of Africa. I spent the last 3 years living in the country of Egypt. And in fact, I'm in the country of Egypt right now as I'm filming this. While I haven't spent as much time in South Africa, it is the newest stamp on my passport, and I visited both of the biggest metropolitan cities in the country, Cape Town and Johannesburg. So it's safe to say I have a pretty clear picture around both countries. That's why today we're going to be comparing South Africa to Egypt in 7 different categories to determine which makes the better country for you to move to. And last thing before we get started, my name is No Limit Eddie. I'm a 25-year-old American who has been traveling the world full time for the last 4 years. If that's interesting to you, drop a like on today's video. Outside of cost of living, which we'll compare at the end of this video, safety is generally at the very top of the list of things to consider before moving to a country. So what better place to start this video off? Egypt, according to the US State Department, is a level 3 out of their 4-tier danger scale. And Egypt has had this rating, I believe, since 2014, meaning the US advises you to rethink traveling to the country of Egypt. It receives this rating due to the potential for terrorism. And of course, terror never happens in America. Now, I'm not making light of those two incidences, but what I am saying is that in the last 3 years of me living here, the only newsworthy event that happened was some ricochet or some rocket that landed in a very far off corner of the country of Egypt that borders Israel. Now, that is crazy, 100%. Rockets landing in a country that you're in, that's crazy. But it is important to have context. I can say that number one, it was accidental, but also number two, the city that I'm in is 672 miles away from where the incident occurred, right? To give you perspective of how far that is, Salt Lake City, Utah is 692 miles away from Los Angeles. So just like right now where the fires are going on in LA, and sure, everyone in Salt Lake City knows about these fires, they're not in any immediate physical harm or physical danger, right? Their lives are going on as normal. And that whole rocket incident happened over a year ago, and it hasn't stopped tourists from coming to the country because Egypt actually went ahead and set a tourist record that very same year with over 15 million tourists visiting the country. Now, those are like the crazy one-off incidences that occur. But let's talk about violent crime stats. So the homicide rate in Egypt, based on this stat that was from 2012, for some reason that's the most recent stat that I could find, but it was 2.5 homicides for every 100,000 people, while the global average is 8 homicides for every 100,000 people. The robbery rate, based on stats from 2011, was 3 out of every 100,000 people, while the global average is 114 for every 100,000 people. It is significantly and statistically a lot safer to live here than most other countries in the world. US State Department gives South Africa a level 2 on their 4-tier danger scale, which actually means they deem it to be 1 point safer than Egypt. The reason it gets this rating is due to crime, civil unrest, and kidnapping. I guess they're like, hey, if you're from America, you're used to this anyway. The country summary of South Africa reads, violent crime is common, includes armed robbery, rape, carjacking, and mugging. There are also smash and grab attacks on vehicles. Violent crime is more common in downtown areas of big cities, especially after dark. Now, this is one of the few times I will actually agree with the US State Department ratings. And I didn't even look these up before going to the country, but after reading it, I agree. You should exercise increased caution while in South Africa. South Africa's homicide rate is 41 out of every 100,000 people. Remember, the global average is 8. So you're 5 times more likely to be a victim of that crime while in South Africa than any other country in the world. When it comes to the crime of rape, this happens 127 people out of every 100,000, which is quite interesting because the country is never really branded as being unsafe for women. There was a study even showing that 1 out of every 4 men have confessed to have committed that crime at some point in their life. I don't know if I can truly believe that stat, that people would just openly admit that, but it is in the NBC News, if that means anything. Now, don't let this discourage you from visiting South Africa, because just like any country in the world, if you move correctly, you'll be okay. Again, I was walking around the city of Johannesburg, walking around the city of Cape Town, and I'm still here surviving. I'm alive, right? So you don't need to like live in a bubble of fear, but you do need to, like the USA Department recommended, exercise an increased amount of caution. The round of safety 100% has to go to the country of Egypt, okay? It is one of the safest countries I have ever been in. Weather. We all relocate to experience the best quality of life possible, and as melanated people, we need the sun for that. Now, weather is more than just the temperatures, it's also the natural disasters that area is prone to experience. These are all super serious things to consider. Weather in Egypt bounces in between two extremes. It's either hot or it's cold and windy. Don't expect anything else besides those two weather patterns. In my 3 years of living here, it's only rained 2 times. And one of those times was during a really cold winter season. So cold, in fact, that when it rained, that rain turned into hail very quickly. And even in a different part of Egypt, there was a snowstorm. I thought before coming to Egypt, it was always going to be hot. So that first winter season, I really got caught with my pants down. The summer months are the ones that we're used to in the States. So like, June, July, August, and then it starts to tail off in September. After that, it basically transitions into the colder months, and there's some kind of a spring in like April or May, but it's really just a less cold winter. The summer weather here in Egypt really reminds me of where I grew up in Southern California. It's a nice dry heat, so you don't have to worry about that humidity and that stickiness that kind of comes along with that. Also, I think because the heat is drier, you don't really have very many mosquitoes here, which is not the case for a lot of other African countries. When it comes to natural disasters, there's mainly two things that happen here in Egypt. One is sandstorms, and two is earthquakes. And growing up in Cali, I'm used to earthquakes. They're not really earth-shattering. And the sandstorms, they're not really all that serious either. They're pretty much just like fog, but made from sand. When it comes to South Africa, I'm just going to speak about what the weather was like while I was there. While I was there, in Joburg in particular, it was hot or it was rainy. And the weird thing was, even when it was hot in Johannesburg, it didn't actually feel hot until you stayed outside for an extended period of time, or you were working up a sweat doing like some type of a physical activity. So if I was to go from like my house to my car, or from like one building to another building, I wouldn't even feel the heat. But in Egypt, the moment you step outside your house, you're gonna be hit with that heat blast immediately. And when it rained, it actually didn't make the outside environment cold, which was nice. So it could rain, the rain can go away, and then the rest of the day can be quite nice and sunny. So I actually did enjoy the weather over in Johannesburg. Now, for all my Americans watching, the seasons in South Africa are actually flipped. So when our summer is, June, July, August, that's actually their winter time. Their summer begins where ours ends. It starts in September, and the warmest month of their year is actually January. In Cape Town, however, when I went, it was hot on some days and then warm and windy on others. Just look at this video you're seeing on your screen right now. Look at the trees in the background. Look how hard the women are having to fight against the wind. Like, the dust was blowing all in my eyes while I was there. Now, as far as natural disasters are concerned in South Africa, thankfully, all praise to the Most High, none of them occurred while I was there, but they do have tornadoes. And as a result of those tornadoes, they also have floods, and they even have earthquakes. In fact, they actually just had an earthquake in South Africa last month. Now, the round of weather can honestly go either way, depending on what style of weather you're used to or what style of weather you will prefer in the country you live in. I'm going to go ahead and give the point over to Egypt just because the weather is quite similar to what I'm used to having grown up in SoCal. Dating. When it comes to relocating, of course you want to know about dating. You want to know, what do the people look like? What are the rules? What are the expectations? What are the financial requirements? Do they even like Black Americans? So because dating is such an important part of our modern lives, we need to talk about it here. And I'm gonna let you know right now, it's not even a competition between which country is better. Starting off with Egypt, I think it's important that I explain my dating philosophy, and that is Black man, Black woman, Black children. And Egypt, in case you haven't noticed, is not a Black country. So I live in a major city here in Egypt, but it's not Cairo. So there's not millions and millions of people here. Therefore, running into a Black woman in this city is a lot like seeing a Bugatti drive down the road. It happens, but it's very, very rare. Now, the black women that are in Egypt, whether they're in Cairo or in this city, they're usually imported here from places like Nigeria, Kenya, or Uganda. And there's also a good population of those coming from Caribbean islands. You're going to have to meet women in Egypt online. They're usually on an app called Badoo, which is like an alternative to Tinder. But starting a real relationship with women here is quite difficult. So I'm going to say around 90% of the women that you will meet in Egypt that are black are house help, right? And their schedules are basically modern day slavery. They work 30 days, 60 days, sometimes even 90 days at a time before given a day off. And it's not like they work and they go home. No, they actually live in the same house as their bosses. So how could you build a real relationship with someone that only gets 3 days, 4 days off in a month before they're locked back away in their master's house? It just doesn't work. Now, I have come across a few who are students. Usually they're from South Sudan and their schedule is a lot more flexible and workable. But the problem is they're generally on freak timing and they're very promiscuous, so it's not really my cup of tea. Lastly, what about local Egyptian women? Well, I have had quite a few local Egyptian women approach me and shoot their shot. Egyptian women are very bold. If they like you, they're gonna let you know. Like I said in the beginning of this topic, black man, black woman, black children. But if you happen to like anyone and everyone, you can have a successful time dating local Egyptian women. However, I don't recommend it. There are pretty strict laws around foreign men dealing with local women. When it comes to dating in South Africa, I'll just tell you this right now. I don't think there is a city on earth that has a higher concentration of gorgeous black women than Johannesburg, South Africa. And that message is signed, stamped, and approved by No Limit Eddie. If I see 10 women on the street, 4 of them are approach worthy, meaning I want to talk to you to get your number so I can see you later. 2 of them are IG level bad, but in real life. No filters and AI required. The other 4 out of the 10, they're disqualified for one reason or another. Maybe they're too old, too young, got children with them, right? Something happens and disqualifies them. But 6 out of 10 women that you see on the streets of Johannesburg, South Africa are worthy to be approached. And the best part is they're friendly and approachable. I was shooting like 75% from the field across the board, even with the 2 out of the 10 that were IG level bad. And when the shot didn't go in, it wasn't an ego crushing defeat. It was like, okay, every dog has his day, move on to the next. I had just finished filming my grocery shopping in Johannesburg video. And if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. 41,000 people can't be wrong. It's a good video. So I just finished filming the video. And for my Americans watching, like, I know it's different than what we're used to, but grocery stores here are inside of the malls, right? And so I just got finished filming that grocery shopping video, and so I'm now walking around the mall doing a little bit of sightseeing. I see this girl, she sees me, she slows down on her walking and starts looking around. She wasn't looking for anything, she was really just giving me an opportunity to, catch up and talk to her. I started off just by asking her for directions, ended up with a number, and then 2 days later we're on a date. And that person paid for the ride to the date and home from the date, and then also offered to pay half of everything that we did during the date. Now, I did not let them pay for any portion of the date itself, but I did let them pay for their ride to and from. And there were so many women there that I met that I couldn't even take out on a date simply because I didn't have the time. I was really grinding videos for you guys. So this round obviously goes to South Africa. It's not even in competition with Egypt at all. South Africa gets the point. Utilities. One thing that us living in the West take for granted is the consistency of utilities. You see, like things in America, they just work. You don't go to the sink, switch on a lever and think, I wonder if the water is going to come out today or not. No, you just switch it on and your hand is underneath the water immediately. You don't even think about it because things just work. But like they say, you don't know what you got until you lose it. And so when comparing countries, it is important to think about how consistent the utilities will be. Off the rip, Egypt is a country that has USA level consistency with all of its utilities, right? Like power, water, gas, they're all very consistent and the bills are very, very low. I'm talking like dollars. Yeah, $2 worth of gas will allow 2 people to cook every single day for months. Electricity, if you're very aggressive with using it, will run you around $10 a month. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm frugal, but I'm not cheap. So I don't run around and switch off all the lights in my house the moment I'm not using them and unplug everything before I go to bed. No. So $10 a month is like the max electricity bill that I've ever had. Now, as far as Wi-Fi is very stable, but it's slow. Now, for the longest time, I thought Egyptian Wi-Fi speeds were just up to par because when you start to live in a place for so long, their normal becomes your normal. So it wasn't until I left Egypt and went to Uganda that I realized how slow internet in Egypt actually is. A video that would normally take me like an hour to upload took me like 15 minutes. They're supposed to be putting in 5G towers, but I still to this day have noticed zero increase in my speeds. Now, when it comes to South Africa, one of the things that we heard so much about from the outside looking in is a thing called load shedding, right? Where there was a schedule where the power in certain areas will be out for a certain amount of hours each and every day. That makes you reconsider the thought of flying to that country. However, load shedding seems to be a thing of the past. They haven't done it since March of 2024. So we're coming up on the 1 year mark and it seems to be going well. Now, while they never have, to my knowledge, declared an official end to load shedding, when I was there the entire time, none of my Airbnbs lost power, nor did any store that I was in lose power. The power was quite consistent the entire time I was there. But the fact that it has happened in the past and they never put an official end to it, at least to my knowledge, if you're planning on uprooting your life and your family there, that is still something to have in the back of your mind that, hey, maybe it'll come back one day in the future. Now, when it comes to electric bills, I stayed in Airbnbs my entire time in South Africa, so I never actually had to pay any electric bills. But from basic research online, it seems the average price ranges from 800 to 2,000 South African Rand. So that's like $43 to $107 per month for electricity. Both are extremely less than I paid in the USA for electricity, so can't complain there. Now, when it comes to water, the South African commenters were so proud and so quick to tell me how clean the tap water is in the country of South Africa. And it is true, the tap water has been deemed safe to drink. Now, do I recommend you to drink that tap water? No. Did I ever drink the tap water? Also no. Trust me, if you are from the States, our body is not built to do these types of things. Do not let a local convince you that it's okay to drink it. No. I use the water, of course, to brush my teeth, to shower, wash my dishes, things like that. And one thing that I found cool is that in Johannesburg, they actually give you your first 6 KLs, that's kiloliters of water, for free. Then you start paying after that. On average, the water bill in South Africa ranges from 250 to 900 Rand. And in dollars, that's around $13 to $48 a month. Now, one area that I think is super important for most of my viewers watching this, especially if you're a digital nomad and you work online, is Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi in South Africa for me was very consistent and it was blazing fast. I'm going to say it is the fastest internet that I've had in quite a long time. I'm pretty sure it was even faster than the internet that was in Turkey. And the cool thing around South Africa too is the internet is everywhere. So the restaurants have internet, the malls have internet. I had a 3 gigabyte plan from MTN on my phone and it literally lasted me over 30 days in the country of South Africa. So yeah, Wi-Fi is very strong. Now, utilities are strong in both countries, both Egypt and South Africa, but I'm going to give this point easily to South Africa based on the fact that the Wi-Fi is just so good. So I'm going to give the edge to South Africa. Visa laws. One of the most important, but oftentimes least considered aspect of relocating abroad is the ease of acquiring a visa. See, you can't just fly to a country and decide, well, I'm never leaving. No, there is a legal process you must go through to obtain the right to reside in that country. And so one of the biggest mistakes that my people make when we move abroad for the first time is not treating visa laws like the priority that they are. And that's the quickest way to get thrown in jail or worse, blacklisted from the country. If you learn one thing from No Limit Eddie, that is to prioritize visa laws. Man, oh man, visa laws in Egypt are too sweet. All right, so when you first enter the country, you buy a 30-day tourist visa for $25. Fun fact, in 2024, Egypt set a record for having over 15.7 million tourists visit the country. Now, if you think about 15.7 million people times $25, Egypt netted a cool 392 million just on visa fees alone. So I get why they're charging the money for the visa. But again, it only lasts for 30 days. So if you want to stay here for 6 months, 9 months, a year, well, what do you do then? Now, residency in Egypt used to be super sweet as well. The way it works is that you would go and rent out an apartment. that apartment would then give you a lease. Let's say you get a 12-month lease, you take it down to the passport office, you pay $100, submit some documents, passport, photos, different small things. You pay $100, and they give you a 1-year residency permit. Now, at some point, the dollar to pound ratio shifted, so it went from like $100 for a year down to like $50 for the year. Now, anyone who has tried to get long-term residency in Africa knows how much warfare you have to go through to be able to secure long-term residency on the continent of Africa. It is a hassle. The fact that I can get a 1-year residency for $50, let me just put it into context. I was watching a video of a Afro-German woman who moved to Kenya, and she was talking about her process of getting a 1-year residency in the country of Kenya, and she has 2 children with her, but she spent $7,000 for a 1-year residency permit. To go from $50 to $7,000, right? That is a 14,000% increase. And like I told you guys, I'm frugal, right? Frugal means why pay more when I could pay less. So am I going to get 14,000% more value from living in Kenya than I would in Egypt? Hell no. I told you guys, that was the price before. The price has gone up. So now it's $150 for a 6-month visa here in the country of Egypt. And it only lasts for 6 months. You have to do that twice a year. So basically $300 a year now to stay in Egypt for a year. Now, when it comes to South Africa, my biggest gripe outside of the safety is the visa. So the way the visa works in South Africa is you fly into the country and you actually get 90 days visa free. So you don't have to do any application, you don't have to pay any money whatsoever. Just show up with your American passport and they're going to stamp you in for 90 days, which is way better on the front end than Egypt. Now, after those 90 days expires, you basically need to fly out the country and fly back in. That will then reset your clock. That's what we call in the travel industry a visa run. Trying to move to a country based on a tourist visa is a lot like trying to move into your friend's house by saying, hey, I want to hang out with you for the day, right? Like, I'm coming over for lunch, and then you start bringing in a mattress and a lamp, and you start bringing your kids in, and you start bringing in your laptop, and like it doesn't work, right? They're going to be like, yo, what's going on? You say you're coming for lunch, but I'm seeing you do all this stuff. When it comes to long-term visas, South Africa does have an abundance of ones that they offer or are planning to offer in the very near future. But it's all controlled by an agency called Home Affairs, which does not have a very good name for being timely. There were even people who got married to South Africans that were waiting over 2 years to get their spousal visa approved. So you could literally marry someone, right? Make a lifetime commitment, and you still couldn't get a visa within a matter of years. So how much less so do you think they care about people who are doing the digital nomad visa or the artist visa or these other ones, okay? It's not the easiest thing to get a long-term visa in the country of South Africa. Now, while Home Affairs is pretty slow in actually issuing a visa, one government agency that does act fast is the police, okay? The police act very fast in South Africa. There's been multiple YouTubers that I've seen. I've seen one, Drew Travels, Nathan Peters, and another one called Make Africa Great Again. All 3 of those guys are foreigners. One of them is from the UK, and the other 2 are from the States that actually got arrested in South Africa due to visa-related issues. Clearly, the winner in this round is going to be the country of Egypt. Nobody in Africa is touching Egypt when it comes to the long-stay visa. I mean, get a lease, go to the passport office, pay $150, twice a year, you're good to go. Okay, there's no lengthy police check, background. No, it's super simple, super easy, and it's very affordable. So Egypt wins this round. Things to do. I assume you're not moving thousands and thousands of miles away to a new country just to sit in your house all day. You want to know what there is to do and the fun you can have in that place. When it comes to things to do in Egypt, it's quite interesting because depending on what you like to do or what you're into, Egypt can be the most fun country in the world or it can be the most boring. And it also depends on who you know. When it comes to parties, right? Like I never knew Egypt to be much of a party country or to have much of a party scene. That was until I met a Ugandan that actually lives in the country of Egypt over in Cairo. And she introduced me to like this whole new world. They have like, WhatsApp groups where they throw on events and they throw parties and they fly artists in from the country. The Ugandan embassy even throws parties for Ugandans that are in the country of Egypt. Like it's wild. I never would have known about any of that had I not met her. There's clubs here in Egypt as well. I'm not a club goer. I've never gone to a club club a day in my life, but I hear there's good clubs in the city of El Guna. If you're more of a family person and maybe you're considering like, do they have amusement parks? Sadly, they don't, right? They have maybe like a water park or two that may be attached to a resort. However, there's no like Six Flags, Knott's Berry Farm alternative here in the country of Egypt, and I don't quite know why. I think they should have something like that. The closest thing you get to a amusement park is like they usually have like a children's play zone inside of the mall, and they'll have like arcade games, little basketball games, the racing games. You will have those in most of the major malls in Egypt. Egypt is not, in my opinion, the best country for like social activities and social life, especially if you're in America. Now, South Africa, in contrast to Egypt, oh my goodness, there's unlimited things you can do in both Johannesburg and in Cape Town. There's a real amusement park. It's called Gold Reef City. When I go back, I would love to take someone on a date out there and vlog the whole experience. They also have, regular parks, the ones that have basketball courts and fields in it and things like that. Also, the one thing that I like around South Africa is there's a lot of community events such as farmers markets. Okay, they have tons of really huge farmers markets that pretty much function as like community parties. A lot of my South African viewers while I was in the country were like, hey, you gotta explore more of the city. I know they have a ton of car meets there, really nice restaurants, nightclubs. Essentially, no matter what you're into or what age you are, there's something to do and engage with in South Africa. And so with that being said, I'm going to have to give this round here to the country of South Africa. Overall, the quality of life in South Africa from a social perspective is significantly higher than it will be here in Egypt, because everyone over there speaks English, and then number two, it's just so developed that they have anything that you want to do. And so this round, this point goes to South Africa. The first two things that any sane human being is going to research when planning to relocate are safety and the cost of living. And really, if we're being frank here, if the cost of living is good enough, you don't even have to worry very much around safety because you can afford to live in the richer, safer areas anyway. Now, I'm a very frugal person. I grew up on 109th and Budlong, homicide capital of LA, right? And so my parents, my mom in particular, right, like she raised us on EBT, on WIC, on Section 8. Like we grew up on welfare. And so I was always surrounded by poverty growing up. And so I was able to see with my own eyes a proverb, a fool and his money are soon departed. And so I learned from a very early age that the lack of financial discipline is the downfall and ruin of a lot of people. And it always kind of disgusted me that people could like get money and then immediately just give it right back, right? They get an income tax and they immediately go buy a car that's repossessed in a month, 2 months, 3 months from now. I'll tell you about my upbringing and how I was raised, not to brag around, hey, I grew up on welfare. No, I tell you that to let you guys know, like, if I can do it, you can do it, right? The key is you just have to learn how to take the right actions in the right proportions for the right amount of time. And so the question is like, what are the right actions to take? And if you want to know that, check this out. By the way, it's Eddie here. It's super loud. I'm in the airport right now, but I just wanted to give you guys a quick message. For those of you guys who are like, okay, I'm in the airport, like I said. How do you travel? How do you do the things that you're doing without ever talking about going to work, without ever talking about having to clock in or clock out for your job or have to ask for time off? Well, I created a free training. It's 10 minutes long, and it's in the description of my video. If you always wanted to know how to make money online, well, now is a really good time to learn. Click the link in my description and put your name and email in and watch the free training. Now, as a result of my upbringing, I became hyperactive when it came to tracking expenses, okay? And so it's to the point where I will tell locals how much things cost in their own country. Therefore, when it comes to the country of Egypt, I'm honestly baffled by how things cost so little. When it comes to transportation, I drive a motorcycle here in Egypt. Well, I did actually sold my motorcycle recently. Does that mean that I'm moving? I don't know. Subscribe and stay tuned. Now, because my motorcycle is now sold, when I want to go somewhere, when I want to slide somewhere, I just borrow my sister's moped. And to keep that moped filled up with enough gas to last both of us using a moped the whole week, it's 50 Egyptian pounds or 99 cents. Rent, I could come on here and tell you how insanely cheap it is, or I can just point you to this video that I made of my apartment tour here in Egypt that went so viral that it got posted on World Star Hip Hop for being a fully furnished one-bedroom apartment that costs less than $200 a month. Food. When it comes to food here in Egypt, in particular, let's say groceries, like, you know how in the States now, Dollar Tree is not even a dollar store anymore? Well, you can take me to a big box grocery store chain here in Egypt. So the equivalent of like a Publix or a H-E-B or a Ralph's or Kroger's. blindfold me, spin me around in 100 circles, I can walk around aimlessly and then grab any random item off the shelf, chances are that item is less than $1. And I'll just give you guys some examples. Like this gigantic water bottle is gonna be like 16 cents. A can of beans normally is like 76 cents. Sometimes you can find it cheaper depending on the store you go to. And of course, a big reason why things are so affordable for me here in Egypt is because I earn money in US dollars. And that's one of the things that you need to know how to do if you plan on moving abroad. And again, that's why the link in the description is here to show you how to do. Based on what you just heard me say, you guys can imagine there's almost no country on earth that can compete with Egypt for the incredible cost of living, right? So it's almost pointless to go head to head with Egypt with cost of living, but let's just do it for the sake of the video. So the same size water bottle that I will get here in Egypt would cost around $1.01. A loaf of bread is going to be like 96 cents in South Africa, and a can of beans is going to be like $1.28. Here's what I would say in defense of South Africa: you get what you pay for. Right? Like when you go to the grocery stores, they look nicer, the people are more upbeat, everyone's so friendly, right? And it helps that everyone speaks English versus here in Egypt, it's an Arabic speaking country. I enjoy the shopping experience so much more in South Africa than I do in Egypt. Do like housing and accommodation. I mean, in South Africa, you're gonna have like those really traditional high-rise buildings. You're gonna have the pool and the gym and the dog park. You're gonna have all kind of really cool amenities inside the building, which they do have here in Egypt too, but it is more difficult to find. So the amount of wealth and the amount of opulence that you're surrounded by in South Africa just makes the increased cost that you pay worth it. Now, Egypt does, of course, have to win this round because just straight up and down, it is the most affordable country I've ever been to, even more affordable than Thailand. So the winner of today's battle between the two countries is Egypt. That's right. Egypt won 4 out of the 7 rounds. But the thing is, this game could have gone to either country. Because remember, the weather is the point that Egypt won, but it also could have gone over to South Africa depending on who you are. Now, honestly, I would love to live in South Africa, but there's 2 things that I would prefer to be sorted out first. The first one is crime, right? Like, why is crime so rampant, and why does it seem like the government is not being very harsh and strong on stumping out crime from that beautiful country? And the second, of course, is still the visa. I would love it if they had easy, straightforward, fast process for getting a visa as it is here in Egypt. Those 2 things would be amazing. If I had to recommend someone who is a new expat who has never lived outside of America before on which country to choose, I would tell them Egypt because it's going to be a smoother, easier transition. But hey, at the end of the day, the beautiful thing is I can still live in Egypt and buy a ticket to South Africa whenever I please. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop a like on it and leave me a comment. Now, Egypt won the battle against South Africa, but the question is, can it retain its title when it's put up against the country of Uganda? Well, click this video right here to find out.